Chapter 4, we're going to be talking about franchises and buyouts, buying a franchise or buying an existing business. So what is a franchise? Somebody opens a business and it becomes successful. Somebody else comes along and says, hey, I'd like to be able to own a business just like yours. Can you sell me the rights to use your name, your manufacturing techniques, your business techniques, your marketing techniques, such that I can be successful just like you're successful? So the franchise concept is basically born. Most fast food restaurants are franchises, McDonald's, Taco Bell, etc. Now, they're not all franchises. Some are corporate owned. And so we'll talk about what the difference between a corporate owned location and a franchise is. A franchise is somebody, a citizen that would like to open a location. And so what they do is they contact the franchisor and they buy the rights to open a franchise of that particular business. This sort of begs the question of the difference between a franchisor and a franchisee. And that terminology used to confuse me, especially when I was reading leases about landlords and lessors, or lessors and lessees. So halfway through a 60-page lease, I would sometimes get confused as to who the lessee is and who the lessor is, and it's kind of the legal jargon, if you will, until I figured out a simple little rhyme. The rhyme is, the lessee rhymes with me, and I'm the little guy. The lessor rhymes with landlord, and that's the big guy. So the same concept applies to franchisor and franchisee. Franchisor is the main corporation that has the rights to the name, the manufacturing technique, or whatever the company is. And the franchisee is a citizen that chose to buy a franchise to operate that sort of business. So it's all determined on the franchise contract. And before you get involved with the franchise, it's highly important that you find an attorney that is experienced in franchise contracts. Not just any business attorney, but an attorney who's experienced in the franchise world. There's all sorts of little gotchas and little phrases, in the terminology of the contract. And at the end of the day, if there is a dispute between the franchisor and the franchisee, the franchisor is going to say, what's in the contract? The court is going to go to the contract first for clarification. So it's critically important that you get an attorney that is very experienced in the verbiage and terminology of the contract language. Various franchising options. You have the product and trade name franchising. You've got a business format franchising. You've got a master license, multiple ownership franchise, area developers. There's all sorts of different types of franchises. This is why it's important that you get an attorney that is experienced in franchise language to help you through the maze of becoming a franchisee. So the advantages of opening a franchise is basically it's a paint by the numbers type scenario. When you start a business from scratch, there's no paint by the number. You have to invent all the new business models, the new business systems. You have to invent your marketing campaign. You have to learn all of this stuff. When you buy a franchise, all of this stuff has been figured out. That's the advantage of buying a franchise. So therefore, when you buy a franchise, it comes with a trademark. It comes with a reputation already. There's access to proven business systems, or you wouldn't be interested in that franchise. There's management training. As a matter of fact, if you own or wanted to buy a McDonald's franchise, you had to agree to go to Hamburger University, where they're going to teach you how to make the hamburgers for McDonald's. There's immediate supply lines, meaning that if you started from scratch and you wanted to open a hamburger restaurant, you'd have to figure out where to buy the meat and where to buy the buns and the onions and everything else that goes into that. Where to buy French fries? Do you make your own, or can you buy them pre-made someplace? When you buy a franchise, all of these things have been figured out, and you have immediate access to all those vendors. Okay, there's financial support. When you start a business from scratch, there isn't a bank out there that is going to loan you startup money. But if you go to buy a franchise, often the franchisor will have a pre-existing relationship with a bank or a lender that will loan you the startup money. The last thing that I want to discuss is that when you open a franchise, you have a significant reduced risk of failure, meaning that you're not inventing anything along the way. You're following a proven business model. So the pros and cons of franchising. Well, you have a proven line of business. There is a pre-qualification. In other words, the franchisor just doesn't accept anybody. They pre-qualify all of the franchisees. Does the franchisee have a deep enough pocket? Can they afford this? What if there's a downturn? Can they afford to float the company as it has a negative cash flow or as it loses money certain months out of the year? And so this is all part of the probability of success. The downside of franchising is the initial franchise fee can be quite expensive. I understand that a McDonald's franchise is several $1 million now. I don't know what a Subway is, but it's less. And so there's some initial fees there. Additionally, cost of tenant improvements. Part of the advantage of the franchisor is that he's able to put some of these tenant improvement or startup costs onto the franchisee. And so there's costs beyond just buying the franchise. There's cost of build out, there's cost of all sorts of different things that come into it. Then you've got a permanent partner, meaning that there's always going to be royalty payments, that part of the percentage of your sales are going to have to go to the franchisor in the form of royalty payments. The other downside is that if the franchisor decides that they are going to advertise in a certain medium, you don't have any choice in that. You get to pay your percentage whether you agree with that advertising or not. Additionally, there's firm restrictions on your business operations. If you had a McDonald's franchise, for example, and you decided that you really, really would like to serve beer, well, you can't do that with a McDonald's franchise here in America. And so there's restrictions on what you can do. Additionally, the franchisor may have restrictions on other business ventures that you get involved in. In other words, if you own a McDonald's franchise, you probably also cannot own a Taco Bell franchise. They're going to restrict your business in multiple ways. Again, you need to have an experienced attorney review the contract. So you have loss of independence, meaning that part of the reason why people go into business for themselves is so they can be their own boss. But if you have a franchisor breathing down your neck and demanding results, it doesn't feel like you're independent. And then sometimes there's a lack of franchisor support. You expect the franchisor to give you advice or help you with a problem, and sometimes they're just not there. So once again, getting a good franchise attorney to read through the contract will be in your advantage. So there's all sorts of different types of concerns about franchising. I'll let you read through this list on your own. I'm not going to read it to you. It's pretty self-explanatory. Franchisor controls on franchisees. They will often limit sales territories. In other words, that if you have a franchise, you can sell in this one particular area. It could be a zip code, could be a corner, could be a radius, some measurement of a territory, and you can't sell outside that territory. Sometimes or most of the time, you have to get site approval. In other words, you can't just decide that you're going to open a McDonald's on any corner. McDonald's and Taco Bell and Subway, they're all very picky about where their locations are being opened. There's all sorts of requirements on appearance, on cleanliness. There's all sorts of restrictions. Again, getting a good franchise attorney is going to keep you out of trouble there. So when you go to evaluate the purchase of a franchise, I think the best advice I can give you is what interests you. Okay, you want to become self-employed, but there's all sorts of franchises out there. Do you want to own a hardware store? Do you want to own a restaurant? Do you want to own a dry cleaners or a delivery business? These are all different franchise opportunities out there. So kind of selecting what kind of businesses hold your interest already is a big advantage. And then you need to start doing your due diligence. You need to go out and interview existing franchisees. You need to read trade magazines and become smart about the franchise. So the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, has a series of rules that limit the franchisor, and there are certain rights that the franchisee has based on the Federal Trade Commission. The franchise disclosure document, referred to as an FDD, is basically a detailed statement of the franchisors, this is the big guys, their finances, their experience, their size, what kind of lawsuits have been filed against them. Once again, you get a good attorney that's going to help you through this maze of paperwork. And ultimately, you're going to get down to the franchising contract. And I can't emphasize enough, get a good attorney to get you through this. So becoming a franchisor, okay, you're the guy that owns this. So my buddy decided to become a franchisor in the martial arts industry. And he quickly learned that that was a pretty expensive option. He spent over $500,000 in legal and accounting fees just getting the documentation correct so he could become an approved franchisor. The benefit of becoming a franchisor is that you're able to open locations relatively inexpensively. To put this in perspective, Kovar's Karate Center is all corporately owned. In other words, our corporation owns all of our locations. And in order for me to open another location, I have to have my company generate the cash necessary to open a location. So once you negotiate a lease, and now we have to do the tenant improvements, we have to build the building or modify the building to where it would work for us. This would include changing rooms and bathrooms and drinking fountains and martial arts mats and front desk and where you're going to put the telephones, and all these sorts of things need to get figured out on the location. While it doesn't look like it, to open a karate school, a 3,000 square foot karate school, is going to cost about $150,000 by the time the smoke clears. So that's $150,000 cash my company needs to come up with. Additionally, the location is not going to make a profit day one. It's going to take it, let's say, 6 months before it makes a profit. So then I have to have the cash on hand to be able to absorb all those expenses or those losses until the location starts to make a profit. So that's the downside of being corporate owned. The upside of opening a franchise or becoming a franchisor is you're able to put all of these expenses onto the franchisee. So then all you have to do is find franchisees that can afford to do this, and you can open more locations faster than you could if they were all corporate owned. The other advantage is that instead of having managers that are on the payroll, you now have owners. The franchisees become owners, and they have increased management motivation. They are motivated to make the company successful. And so there's a definite advantage there versus having an hourly employee that was looking for a job when he found this one. The drawback of becoming a franchisor is that you have a reduction in control. Yeah, you can't just walk into a franchise and say, hey, I don't like what's going on, I'm going to fire you. It's very difficult to do that. Once again, the franchise contract, determines what you can and can't do. So you don't have as much control of a franchisee as you would if you owned your own, if you own the location outright. Additionally, you don't make as much money because the franchisee wants to share in the profits. He put money into the company. He has a right to share the profits. So buying an existing business. And so these are some of the questions you would go through before you buy an existing business. The advantage of buying an existing business is that there are certain uncertainties that you don't have to run into. You're buying an existing operation. You've got existing customers. You've got existing inventory. You've got existing relationships with vendors. You don't have to invent all of this the way you would if you were to start a business from scratch. And generally speaking, you can buy a business for less than what it would cost you to start that exact same business. Often you will find a business owner that wants to retire. He's looking to have a steady income coming out of this business in his retirement years, and they're willing to finance the business for you. So often the startup costs are less by buying an existing business than if you were to start your own. So one of the things, the same thing before you go decide to buy a franchise, is what are your areas of interest? You're going to be far more successful doing a business that you're interested in. What are your hobbies? What are your passions? If you can find a business for sale that's there, you're money ahead. So this takes into consideration your talents and all that sort of thing. There are business brokers out there that specialize in selling businesses, and one of the next steps would be to engage a business broker to help you find the business that you're interested in. So the pros and cons of buying an existing business. The pros are you have a very high chance of success. Again, you've got an existing customer base, you've already got inventory, you own patents, you own distribution rights, you are able to get vendors, that sort of stuff. It takes less planning to buy an existing business than it does to start a business. You already have much of the same equipment, and generally you're able to get it at a better price. You have experienced employees. You have existing business records, existing business reputation in the industry. Those are the pros. Now for the cons. Many of the same things that were pros could also be cons. So you have a high chance of success. Well, the cons of that is what if you've turned off, the prior owner has done a bad job in customer relationships, and now the company's got a bad reputation, or it's really kind of got a bad reputation with a lot of the vendors. The vendors are upset, or the machinery or the equipment you're buying are old and out of date and in disrepair. And there's a modernization that is required. The equipment is out of date. You have to buy new equipment. Or you're stuck to a poor business location. I have a friend that bought a urgent care clinic, an urgent care medical clinic. We jokingly refer to it as a doc in the box. He bought an existing location, and it turned out it was a horrible location. The demographics were changing. He ended up having to file bankruptcy. It was a poor decision. So with franchises and with buying an existing business, there's nothing like doing your due diligence. Due diligence simply means doing your homework. What you're trying to do is learn as much as you possibly can about the franchisor or about the business that you're looking to buy. And same thing if you were to buy a house. You'd want to scope out the neighborhood, scope out all sorts of stuff. That's part of due diligence. You need to do your due diligence. We've already talked about business brokers. The other person you're going to want to bring in, either a franchise or when you're buying a business outright, is you're going to want to bring in your own accountant to look at the books, to give you advice, your own attorneys, other experience. You cannot get too much advice as far as I'm concerned. So here's a list on due diligence. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read through it. It's a good list, a comprehensive list. This next page of documents required for due diligence, I'd highly recommend you print this out. It's actually in the textbook. You could copy it out of the textbook if you wish and run through the list. This is a good checklist for you to go through. The other thing that I want to know is why is the business for sale? What's the owner's reason for selling? Does he want to retire, or is the business going south? Are the demographics changing? Is this really not a good business plan, and he wants to try to recover some of his costs or put the burden onto somebody else? So I would do lots of research. Don't just take the owner's word for it. I'd start interviewing customers and clients and vendors. Get as smart as you can, because this is going to be a significant portion of your life. So they have what they call an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And when you sign an NDA, that means that you agree to not talk about the business to somebody else. And so before an existing business or maybe even a franchisor is going to show you their books, they're going to require you to sign an NDA. That's a confidentiality agreement. And so, once again, before you buy a business, you're going to want to review several years of tax returns and financial statements, and get a CPA to also look over these books with you to get their advice. So how do you value a business? There's 3 different ways of doing a value of a business, much like 3 different ways of valuing real estate. Okay, so the first one is an asset-based valuation. How much are the assets? So you're looking at buying a company. How much do the tractors or the trucks or the machinery or the equipment, the inventory, how much does all of that add up to if you had to replace it? What's its present market value? So you have 10 used trucks. Well, what are the value of those individual trucks? You have a warehouse full of inventory. Is the inventory current, and can it be sold, and what could it be sold for? What's the value of the inventory? Or if you had to replace it, how much would you have to spend? And so you would add up all these assets, and then you would determine a value of the asset of the business. The other one would be to do a market comparison, meaning what are other businesses of similar size, similar scope selling for? What are they valued at? And then the assumption is that the business you're buying would be worth in that same range. And then lastly would be a cash flow based valuation. How much profit or cash flow is the company generating? And there are formulas for generating, and depending on the business, whether it's buying an apartment complex or whether it's buying a gas station or a restaurant, there are cash flow expectations, and that you can base a value of the company based on the free cash it generates. So some of the non-quantitative factors in valuing a business is to evaluate what are the competition. Is there lots of competition in the area, or is there no real competitor in the area? Is the market, is it a maturing market, or is it a growing market? What's the future of the community? Wouldn't it be horrible to be buying a business in a community that is dying off or leaving town, if you will? And then what are the legal commitments of the company you're buying into? Are there long-term legal commitments or gotchas that are going to come and get you? These are all different things that you need to be concerned about before you buy into a business. And then terms of purchase. They have what they call an asset purchase, and every time I've acquired another business, I have done an asset purchase. And the difference between doing an asset purchase versus just buying the business is, an asset purchase, you're only purchasing the assets. So when I come to buy a karate school, I would buy the students list, I would buy the mats, I would buy the things that are considered assets. But I wouldn't buy the corporation, I wouldn't buy the company, I'd just buy the company's assets. What this does is, in the event that there's a lawsuit pending out there someplace, if I buy the whole business, I also buy that lawsuit. But if I only buy the assets, I leave the lawsuit with the company that I bought the assets from. So it's much better to do an asset purchase than an outright purchase of the company. Indemnification clause. Indemnification simply means hold harmless. It means that the other person is, or you agree to hold somebody else harmless, or to indemnify them in the event of a lawsuit. So often in a purchase agreement, the guy you're buying the business from will have you sign and hold an indemnification contract or an agreement, basically saying that you're going to hold him harmless in the event you get sued in the future. And so if somebody sues you in the future and they sue the prior owner, the indemnification clause gives the owner the ability to go back against you for any damages that the owner got. And it works the other way around too. When it comes to closing a sale, it's best handled by an escrow company or a third party. Often an independent attorney or an escrow company will do this for you. And how this works is, imagine two kids in a playground saying, "Hey, I want to sell you a toy," and the guy, the other one says, "Okay, great, I got $1," and the first kid says, "Okay, so here's my toy. You first give me the $1." And so the buyer gives the other kid $1, and then the kid runs off with both the $1 and the toy. And then later, it works out to a he said, she said. I gave him $1, and he's supposed to give me the toy, but you don't have any witnesses, and it just causes problems. So a third party, an independent third party, would be somebody who stands in the middle. And we get back into the same scenario. I want to buy the toy for $1, so I'm going to give the $1 to an independent third party, and then the boy with the toy gives the toy to the third party, and the third party then trades the $1 to where it goes and the toy to where it goes. And this is an oversimplified version of how an escrow works. But this happens in property, it happens in business sales all the time. It's a way of developing a sense of trust that somebody's not going to get conned. In conclusion, before you get into a franchise or before you buy an existing business, get the best attorney and best legal advice you can afford. It's absolute money best spent. You also need to get the best CPA that you can afford, certified public accountant, get the best accounting advice you can. And then lastly, I would encourage you to get the best insurance broker you possibly can. Those three professionals will definitely keep you on the right track.